Master Moody, we're off to the races here. We're live on Facebook. We're recording. We're off and running. I thought I'd just start without everybody, but we may have Bob join us. We may have Jeff join us. We may have one or other of us drop out while we go. Who knows? But we are off to the races. And Greg, I think we have two topics today. The primary topic is, how to add 100 students to your school for back to school.
Yeah.
And um, and it might be worth addressing, although I doubt if we'll have time, of why July and why early August and late June really are busy times, not slow times. We keep hearing from people who say, "Oh, July is so slow," but I mean, we found it to be one of the most fruitful times for marketing of the year, not the slowest time. But that may have to be a topic for another day. But the other topic I thought might be worth touching on, although we won't have any time for any substance, is really what the secrets are of the school operators that are running $1 million operations versus the 95% of the industry that's struggling hand to mouth, month to month, right? And I wanted to find terms when I talk about $1 million schools or organizations. What you and I are talking about, what we're developing are schools that are take home net personal income to the owner 400, 500, 600, 700,000. We're not talking about I've got $30,000 a month in rent, 50 people working for me, and I've got 1,000 students, and the top line looks good. And by the time I get done, I can barely afford a Honda Civic, right? So, and again, that's not a conversation about Rolexes and Ferraris, but what we are always doing is focusing on, and I keep butchering my own quote. You fixed me, but low headaches, right? Low brain damage, simple, high net, and with high lifestyle value, with high service to the students. So, in other words, I guess what I mean by that is make a lot of money, give great service to your students, and make it simple and keep the level of brain damage and the level of headaches out of the operation. Is that a fair way to say it, Greg?
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff to people, what happens a lot is they go, oh, well, I don't believe you. And in fact, some people in the industry goes, well, that doesn't even exist. $100,000 a month school doesn't exist, and which we have example after example where it just does. Or the other piece is, well, you're selling out. You're not doing stuff right, or you're not doing stuff with high ethics. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it's the opposite.
Opposite.
If you're gonna do our schools that are high income and high net, I would say that the defining characteristics are that they have better student service, higher quality black belts, higher quality students, and that the lifestyle of the instructor and the guy and the person running it is better, so that they're running their school in a calmer fashion. They have a better day-to-day operation. Hey, it doesn't mean they're not, they're entrepreneurs. They're busy. They can be busy people. But a couple of our examples, they were a couple. Jan Lappin's one of them. She's gone for the whole summer pretty much,
Oh
and
yeah, she's
doing over
touring
$100,000.
every interesting stop in Europe as best,
Yeah,
best
yeah,
I can track.
exactly. That's one that comes to mind because we don't see her for pretty much most of the
Well,
summer.
well, Tim Harrison took a month off and rode on his Harley. I keep trying to convince him to get a BMW, but on his Harley, he rode the old Route 66. You'd be doing it in your Tesla, trying to recharge every.
Not charging that much, but the point is I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff, people feel like, well, that's too good to be true. And in the other world outside of our people, in what you, I think, even more charitably than it deserves, call the bozo explosion of consultants, they don't know how to show people to do this. So instead, their reaction is, well, that doesn't exist, and doesn't work that way, and blah blah blah. And so what ends up happening then is that people get de-inspired, and they don't really look for that type of growth. They don't look for that type of success, and they don't look for that type of wonderful job and wonderful work and wonderful business that this can be.
or they're grossing 20,000 a month and they're breaking their arm, patting themselves on the back because they think they've arrived.
Yeah.
And and again, if you want to run a $20,000 a month school and you have a decent income from it and you've got a decent lifestyle and you're happy with that, more power to you, right? I'm not, but what we know is most of the school owners that we talk to who reach out to us who are at that level, they have a 4 times more complicated operation than they should have, and they have what we do is we turn a 20,000 a month gross school first into a 20,000 a month net school with half of the headaches, and then turn that school into a $40,000 a month net operation, right? And and the formula is pretty simple. I hate to get into, we try not to spend too much time on pricing because, it doesn't matter whether somebody's in Malibu, Manhattan, or Dodge City, Kansas, or Mankato, Minnesota. Everybody tells us 2 things. One is we can't charge that in our area because, and they always have a because. Sometimes the because is the area is too rich. Sometimes the area is too smart. Sometimes the area is too poor. Sometimes none of the other martial arts schools charge that much. Sometimes it's already there at the highest of any other martial arts school in the area. Sometimes it's at the middle of any other martial arts schools in the area. But there's always a because, right? Nobody, and I talked to a school in Malibu. I mean, if you know Malibu, it's where all the movie stars buy their beach houses, right? I mean, it's even more expensive than your dream town.
Santa Barbara.
Another 20 minutes up the coast or something. But people just have all these different rationales about money, and what we're always teaching is massive improvements in student service, primary focus on the internal development, on the mental, emotional, on the personal development, and then having a high revenue per student and a high lifetime value per student. Lifetime value comes from student retention, and most schools are dropping out 7 to 10% a month. We can get big schools down to 1 or 2% a month, right? The other part of that is what their average revenue per student is, and this is not a suggestion on a monthly rate, but by the time you do initial tuition, you do monthly, you do a renewal, you do some accelerated or what do you call compression payments,
Right.
etc. To me, $1 million a year school is 300 active students at an average revenue of $300 a month per student. That's a $90,000 a month school, and of course that pushes you over $1 million for the year. And a 300 active student school can be run with 2 full-time staff members, and it can bring 50 to 60% to the bottom line after marketing costs, payroll, etc. And it can be run in 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. You don't need 12, 15,000 square feet. But hey, Bob is here, and I will let him in and promote him to panelist. There we go. But on that note, let's shift to or add anything you want, Greg, and then let's shift to back to school marketing.
Well, yeah, the steps to do this are not hard. They're not. There doesn't always mean they're easy. We got to kind of get out of your. The biggest problem usually is getting out of your own mindset to do this. So everybody listening, and we'll I'm sure usually at these kind of things we have a lot of people listening to the recording. So when you're listening to the recording and we talk about the next steps in this, we'll give you a lot of options for the next steps with us. Understand that these aren't really difficult steps. They are pretty straightforward, but they take you. You've got to get out of your own way and out of your own mindset that what you've done in the past and what you see other people do is almost always going to be wrong. Mm-hmm. 98% of the industry does what weirdly does things too complicated, does things too cheap, and it in a sense they devalue what we do in martial arts. And what we want to do is have high value for what we do in martial arts. Of course, we want to get paid for that, but then that ends up having a ripple effect across what happens in the school. So the students value what you do more, and you end up having a much better operation and much better lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's exactly right. And welcome, Bob Dunne.
Thank you,
And
sir.
Bob, you've been working with martial arts school owners, God, I don't know,
Long
15,
time.
17 years now or something like that.
Been a long time, sir. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And Bob, I did a little brief aside to start us with, what the secrets are of the $1 million a year school or $1 million a year schools, and I might shift it to what the impediments are to getting there. And to me, the impediment is blinders on, not ever being in a room with school owners that are bringing 100,000, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600,000 to the bottom line, not having a belief system that is capable, and it's the belief system that has to be the predecessor of putting together the tools to get there. What might you add quickly to that conversation before we move on, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I mean, the biggest problem is that most of the school owners, they compare themselves to the school down the road from them, right? And they're always in competition with them, even whether it's their pricing or scheduling. And then, we could go even deeper into the aspect of how a lot of them are actually, well, number one, even, generating their leads, following up with their leads, and then actually doing their whole intro process to actually get a student committed to wanting to become a student. Correct. I mean, so that process in itself is a whole problem, is problematic to where their price point is, I guess, and I don't know if we want to go down that road, but kind of yeah, I mean, so anyways, yeah.
Let's go down that road for 12 seconds. Is
Okay.
if you are overwhelmed with people who are enthusiastic about starting as new students in your school, and you have enrollment conferences back to back and intros back to back, then it's very easy to see how you can restructure your program, how you can charge a higher rate, one thing or another. And if you get a new student in the door once a week, and you're terrified to lose any of them, right? Then it's very difficult to get yourself where you're comfortable with improving the tuition structure and the price. And to me, that's where with new clients that we work with, new schools, we always start with program structure and tuition. They're keeping track of their numbers in their sales process, meaning the confirmation calls, the making appointments, bringing people in for an introductory, converting that to an enrollment, and getting that really tight before we open the floodgates and turn into what our clients have called drinking from a fire hose. But it's only once you have that drinking from a fire hose thing going. And one of our clients, Delfino down in El Paso of all places, he created 40 appointments this last weekend. And so if you have 40 intro appointments lined up for the week, then it's hard to be. And by the way, same client, he had a slow month where he didn't have a lot of intro traffic coming in, and all of a sudden he started questioning his pricing. So I think that psychology is completely valid. Is if I've got if I in my mind, if I need say 20 new students in this month, and I've got 50 intros, I'm not stressed about losing one or two. And frankly, if I'm not stressed about losing one or two, I get my closing rates are higher, because selling hungry never works, and being desperate never works, right? So I think that's a key component. But anyway, Greg, Bob, anything to add on that topic, and let's get to our main topic here.
Yeah, what I've never seen is that as long as it's not a between the ears of the person doing the sales,
Yeah.
as long as they're not the one that's nervous, raising price or changing the pricing structure has never really affected closing rates. And you're right, focusing on marketing and getting enough lead flow calms you down about those types of things. And that's usually where people are messed up. But we end up having people come to us and say, well, okay, well, great, we need to have some marketing. So what's the one or two things that we should do?
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up being the wrong question.
Yeah, well, that's right. Everybody wants the magic pill.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah,
Uh,
that's spot on.
if I were to say that there's two mindsets that guarantee failure, is to think that there's a magic pill and think that there's magic pixie dust. And what I mean by the magic pill is that there's the one thing I'm missing. That if I do this one thing, I'm now going to be wildly successful. What's the one secret that I'm missing? And the magic pixie dust is, you're going to sprinkle me with your wisdom, and I'm going to sit on my ass, do the same things I've always done, and all of a sudden I'm going to be wealthy. That's the remember when the book and then the movie The Secret came out. That was the great fallacy of that. It was, it left the impression I go sit in the corner and I think good thoughts, and think myself wealthy, and that works. Well, I've got to think good thoughts, and I got to go take, in Tony Robbins' terms, massive action to get that to happen. So it's the combination of those two things.
Hey, Master Oliver, I was just going to ask, are we recording? I think we're on
We
Facebook.
are. We
are.
are recording on
Okay.
Zoom. We are recording
Okay.
for the replay of the webinar.
Okay, I just didn't see the recording button there. There it is. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted,
And I
wanted to be
just want to
thorough.
add real quick too.
But it's good to ask, because I don't know how many times
We have had that happen before.
I have logged in early, and yeah, we're right now live on Facebook, and we are recording on Zoom.
Okay.
And the Zoom webinar. We really didn't promote this to speak of live, so most people who are going to watch it are going to watch on the recording. So
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
yeah.
And anybody who's on here that's not a member, give me a call. It's 720-256-0208. I can't urge you enough. Look, again, what I find a lot of times is a lot of the school owners, they really they surround themselves with like school owners. And the value is, I think, of our group is obviously you become surrounded by the top 1% of the industry. So, and you become a percentage of who you surround yourself with, right? You're learning from them, you're feeding on them, you're picking up all of their, habits and so forth. So, just wanted to flip that back in. So,
Well, that's exactly right. And Bob, I understand how most of us martial artists work. I promoted one of the biggest tournaments in the country for 10 years. But, you go to regional tournaments, local tournaments, national events held by your organization or by, NASCA or, the different organizations, whether, Greg, it be ATA or the Jiu-Jitsu organizations or NAGA or whatever. And you talk to other school owners there, and what you end up with is having a bunch of conversations with other people who are failing.
yeah.
And then and it's kind of like masterminding with failures. I mean, there's the great principle of masterminding, but the key element of that is being surrounded with people who are at where you want to be and who have already expanded their thinking, who are going to help you get to that point. But I guarantee you go to any of the martial arts organizations, and they tend to have mostly small part-time schools, and they have the professional full-time guys tend not to be doing very big numbers. And so, you can go to a business seminar and be listening to somebody who's grossing $15,000 a month, telling you about how to get rich in the martial arts, and unless you recognize that's the environment you're in. And in our group, that's barely the lower threshold for people we bring in the door. I mean, it's we have a ton of schools that come in working with us at $30,000 a month on day one, that we get to $60,000 within a year. Schools that are doing $17,000, $18,000 a month that we get into the mid 30s or 40s. We have schools that come in working with us that start at 40 or 50 that we get them to 100 in the first year, and then of course the sky's the limit from there. But you're absolutely right, Bob. Is if you go to your organization meetings, your organization testings, your local, regional, national tournaments, whatever association you have of other martial artists, 9 times out of 10, the most successful people in those organizations and the average school owner you're sitting down with having breakfast, lunch, or dinner with and talking are the ones that are either whining about how hard it is, or their idea of success is barely scratching the surface. So you're
My
exactly
best, yeah, I was going to say my best example. I don't know if I've ever told you a story, which is weird because I thought we shared most of our stories, but I remember it reminded me of this. I thought when I started in the business in my organization, it's a big organization, ATA, that I thought I sucked. You know, I kept hearing these stories about how great everybody was doing, and man, I kept working on doing better and better and better. And then one day they started releasing numbers of how many new members people put in their system, and it was about 6 years into me being a school owner, and sure enough, I was number one, like in
yeah.
all the categories, and or pretty much number one in almost every category. And I'm like, oh well, instead of me being the guy that I thought really sucked, and I was like right in the middle, I was number one in a bunch of the categories. And it wasn't, you know, it was very nice for my ego, but it showed me that I was listening to, I was trying to absorb these messages from other people who were teaching the seminars and teaching stuff, and I was not listening in the correct places. So that was a really good example. It was very hard data that you don't get the perception. Who else would you listen to though, is the guys that have been around for a long time and the guys that seem to, you know, talk about knowing what they're doing. That makes a lot of sense, but it
They
really,
carry themselves with great confidence on the stuff that they're spewing.
yeah. And common sense isn't common sense, and or common knowledge isn't common sense isn't common sense. What's the phrase about that?
Yeah.
But that's a really difficult thing in
Yeah,
this.
common sense isn't common.
Yeah, common sense isn't common. There you go. And it's not just this industry, it's a lot of other industries that we see that in, that we observe, where you look around, watch things in the industry, and then a really bad strategy is to try to pick out ideas. You know, number one, you're picking from probably a pool of people that probably aren't that great. Number two, then you think your job is to cobble those ideas together into something. Well, you don't have time to do that as an entrepreneur. And frankly, you don't have the skills to do that, because that's not your job. Your job is to run the business day to day. That's our job for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Toby Milroy, back when I first started working with him, this is a number of years ago. Now he was doing about 17,000 a month, and he had the same story, Greg, and he was also part of ATA at the time. Is going to a seminar, and you know, he had his notebook. He's a very diligent student. He took notes, you know, the entire time, and you know, was really thought he was hearing some really good ideas. And then towards the end, he asked a couple questions and realized that all of the people who are teaching the seminars were doing half of what he was doing already. Um, and of course we got him from 17,000 to 60 or 70 in about 6 months. But it's just being in the right place with the right group of people is the key. But the other thing, you'll appreciate this, Greg. The webinar we did 2 or 3 months ago, Greg Silva watched it and contacted me, and he called me out on using a story, including him in the thing, and he wasn't disputing the quality of the point. He said, "Oh my God, you told a story about sitting in my school and going through the books, and it was down in God, what is it, outside of Fort Lauderdale where he was at? No, in from the coast from Boca. It'll come to me in a second. But anyway, he had this school and you know, 1,000 students, one thing or another. And I was telling a story, I think about retail, probably.
Pro shop, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the story.
And he said, you know, what got you to use that story? I said, well, Greg, it must be, because he said that must have been 35 years ago. I said, well, it wasn't quite that long, but you know, it was a long time ago. And I said, well, I guess the older we get, the older our stories are. You know, it's kind of like your story. You had a lot more hair and a lot less gray back when that story had happened. But let's not miss our mission here to talk about back to school marketing. So let's start with this, and I'm aware that some of what I'm going to say right now is. Many school owners don't have a good database of people who are prospects in one thing or another. So the first thing I'm going to suggest is really for people who have been running a pretty efficient operation already. But one of the ways that I always looked at back to school was in twofold. One, that summer was a perfect time to go stir up a bunch of fresh leads. I was always looking for, let's go generate 1,000 fresh leads for the school. And you can pick up whatever your number is. And it's a back to school is a perfect time to then follow up with those leads, because the ones that didn't enroll in July may well be excited to get started in September when things have settled down from the summer. Plus, let's go back to everybody who raised their hand 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. And what I mean by that is opt ins on your website, people who called, you got contact information, they never showed up, people you called and did or did not make an appointment, people who came in for an introductory class and didn't enroll, and students who, enrolled, took class for a few months, and then faded away. And so what my first recommendation is, and again, for smaller schools, you may not be in a situation where you have that information. I've worked with even bigger schools that hadn't even put them in an Excel spreadsheet. We had to take a stack of 2,000 pieces of paper, and I think that time we shipped them to the Philippines for a nickel a piece and had them data entered. But it's a perfect time to follow up on all of those people who expressed any level of interest. And that could be they attended a birthday party, they came to a buddy day, you went to their school and got a permission slip, you went to their carnival or fair at their school. I mean, you could, there's 50 different ways you could have gotten their contact information. But if they expressed any information, we know that New Year's, back to school, start of summer are all peak times when parents are looking for something for their kids, where adults are looking to get into a regular activity, where adults are looking to get in better shape, where parents are focused more on discipline and consistency and personal development. All of those things are the perfect combination of a time to go market to. And by that, I mean sequential direct mail, meaning mail to them weekly for 6 weeks, twice a week for 6 weeks, email to them once or twice a day, text message them once a week, put a live human being on calling them all. Now, we know that there's problems with that from time to time, because if you're not in their people are 100%, mobile. If you're not in their database, they don't answer the phone. That's a different story. But what would you add to that, Greg?
Well, I think people don't keep track of that information first. So a lot of times it's really easy to gather that information up. What we find with a lot of schools is that they have the idea that we have a lot of good examples of this, but they have the idea that somebody comes in for a birthday party, they call them a couple times, and then, well, I called them, a couple times and they're not interested. So therefore, they toss that lead away, or hopefully they haven't tossed it away, but it's buried in their file cabinet somewhere, and that isn't valuable anymore. And I think they miss the point that person has had some contact or had some connection with you. That makes them still much more valuable than you just sending out a mailer or doing an AdWords campaign or a Facebook campaign on the internet. So that person is, what do we estimate, 10 to 100 times more likely to respond at some point. It just wasn't the right time at the birthday party. It wasn't the right time at the event at the school. It wasn't the right time somewhere else. So it's really literally like a gold mine that you haven't tapped into yet. That your prospect list is a list that we want to keep on connecting with, and this is the perfect time to do that, because this is more likely that they would want to do something or take some action. And even the ones, Master Oliver, though, that you maybe didn't mention, or maybe you mentioned but I didn't catch it, that have come in and done an intro lesson but said no. Maybe they even said no and said it was too expensive. Well, maybe now it won't, maybe the circumstances in their life have changed, and maybe they said it was too expensive, but really they weren't that motivated at that moment for some other reason. And it just,
or they had just blown the transmission out in the car and they were shell shocked over the $3,000 bill.
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of reasons why at that moment it may not have been the right choice for them, but later it was. What was the classic one we talked to somebody recently where they had a really great follow-up campaign. Somebody came in and they had 30 or 29
Oh yeah,
emails that went out.
29 days, once a day, and then
Yeah.
they ask canned it.
Yeah, and then they said, well, they're not interested. Well, that's ridiculous. Imagine somebody coming in from an event and you follow up for 29 days, but they were in soccer during that time. And the soccer finished in 45 days, and you gave up on them right before soccer finished. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Well, a personal story would be like my son, right? Is if he had gone to a birthday party or filled out a form or whatever the mechanism was, taken an intro early June. He then, in late June, went to Europe on a World War II trip, went to London, went to Normandy, went to Churchill's War Room, Berlin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he was literally out of the country for 10 days. He came back for a day or two. We went to see my parents, his grandparents in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then we came back, and he made me suffer through Comic-Con in San Diego. And then we came back, and a close friend of the family passed away. We went back to Tulsa for a funeral. So literally, there was a 6-week period of time that no matter how excited and interested he was, ain't going to happen. On the other hand, he goes back to school in less than 2 weeks. So if they were following up and mailing in the mail, now email, I'd probably never see it, and a lot of people would never see it. But if they were sending direct mail and they were following up and text messaging and so forth, it might be a perfect time to enroll him today or enroll him in 3 weeks, a week after school went back in session. And most people are like that, right? There's all kinds of reasons why they came in and didn't enroll. You use the example of they said it's too expensive. Well, too expensive compared to what? Too expensive because grandma had some extra hospital expenses. You had to replace the transmission in the car. Dad was unemployed for 6 weeks. Whatever it is, all of those life circumstances change. Number one. Number two, their schedule changes. You mentioned soccer. They were in soccer, they're not in soccer, and so forth. But again, if you don't have a big list of everybody you've interacted with, or maybe you haven't interacted with that many people, but if you don't have a big list and all that stuff, lesson number one is always keep a database. And a database could be a stack of papers that you put in Excel. It could be in a Google Sheet, or it could be in some sophisticated software. There's everything from on one end of the spectrum, Salesforce and Keep, to, all the different martial arts packages that are out there. But somewhere you want to keep name, mailing address, mobile number or phone number, email address forever, and you want to communicate with anybody who raises their hand even a little bit forever. So by email every week, preferably multiple times a week, by direct mail every month. You want to communicate with them until they, move to Afghanistan or, threaten to kill your firstborn if you ever communicate with them again. But short of that, right, you want to be communicating with them forever. So let's go on to the next thing. Is with back to school in the kids market, there's a number of things that are really unique that you can do right at the outset here, right? Is Greg, as you know, and you then cloned it in Phoenix, and your area was one of the hardest in the country to get into the public schools, to tell you the truth. But I have done in my own schools, I don't know, what might you guess, 10,000 new enrollments over the years from direct outreach into elementary schools.
Oh yeah, that's probably a conservative estimate, and people on the listening may think, well, that's crazy. How could it be that many? But if you add it up over the number of years you did it over 6 schools times, 2 or 3 of those a year, it's absolutely doable.
Yeah, it may have. Now that you say it, may be a bigger number than that. I mean, just in one of my locations, when I stepped in for a while to do a turnaround, I did 38 enrollments in one day, 78 enrollments in 1 month, both the same month, and 480 enrollments in 1 year, belly to belly, face to face, just from elementary school outreach programs. And when it comes to back to school, you have back to school nights, you have new student orientation days, different areas and probably different countries. We've seen different school districts in the same state call them different things, but a variety of things where the parents are invited to come in with the kids and come meet the teachers, see the classroom, learn about stuff. Some schools have a much more formal version. We made, I think it was 82 appointments in 3 hours at one charter school, but they were more organized. What they did is they had in the gymnasium, they had the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the different clubs. I forget what else they had, but they had the different clubs and one thing or another. And literally, everybody came into the gym and sorted through this line and went by all the booths and signed up for any activities and sports activities and stuff that they wanted to participate in, right? And we just plugged our booth in between the other activities, and this was a big school. They had 700-800 students, but we got 7 or 10% of them to register for a free trial in martial arts. Now that's pretty damn efficient. But back to school orientation days, back to school days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that can be huge. One of our clients who's done a really good job with that, Jan Lappin down in Florida. You mentioned Jan gallivanting around the world right now, and good for her, by the way. I'm not being critical in any way. She should be doing that. But every year they do for one location, between 80 and 120 enrollments in 6 weeks, just from that one thing. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you built a relationship with elementary schools, middle schools, probably not so much high schools, but look for all the stuff going on. Nowadays, a lot of it they have on their website, but I never default to that. I know here the schools, the staff goes back between a week and 2 weeks before school starts. So I've done, go in and present to all of the PE teachers in the entire district a week before school started, or at the very least go to every school and talk to the lady at the front desk, find out what they have going on. Do they have fairs, carnivals lined up? Do they have a back to school night? Do they have a parent orientation? Do they have some other type of event? And get myself plugged into that. So that's a way, right as school starts, that you can generate a huge amount of traffic. What would you add to that, Bob or Greg?
Well, I think sometimes people have the misconception, or they've tried one or two times to go to a school and they hear us say this and they get the message. And those of you listening might get in your mind thinking, yeah, I've tried that, but they rejected me. Mm-hmm. And so they rejected me, and you feel like that's a permanent rejection. And in all cases, in all instances, there's no way any of this stuff would work. So thanks a lot, but none of that shit that you said would work. But that's not so there I go. But here's the thing. There's number one, related to what we just said before. Right now, 6 months ago or 6 years ago, you talked to them, doesn't mean that's always going to be the case. Number two, there's multiple ways into schools. There's the principal, the PE teacher, the PTA group, the sometimes the district, although that obviously that's a big home run, but that's harder to do.
And by the way, that's dangerous.
It's
if you go get a district office, no, oftentimes you get a no for all the schools.
Right. And there's multiple ways in. The teachers can have you come in for an event, but one of them I like is, for example, the PTA. I like going just show up at the PTA meetings. I've never been rejected at a PTA meeting except for one time, and I've probably been to hundreds of PTA meetings between me and my staff. One time they said, "Oh, but you're not on the agenda, so you can't speak." That was one time. And then we went the next time and we were on the agenda because that particular PTA
they're happy to add you to the agenda.
Yeah, they must have read the Robert's Rules of Order when they were in high school, and they think that they have to enforce that. But other than that, out of probably 1,000 of these, I don't know the exact number, but it was well more than the hundreds. PTA meetings, they let us, you just show up and you say, I'd like to talk about what we can donate to your school, and then you can talk. But PE teachers are great ones to go. So there's lots of ways and lots of entrees to talk to them. Now's a great time of year before school gets back in session. So there's multiple entry points.
Well, and don't skip over that. Now is the perfect time to talk to the staff, because in almost every school, every district, they're required to show up for work a week to 2 weeks before the kids show up to get their ducks in a row. And now you're communicating with them without, 500 kids in the building and they're all going 20 different directions.
Well, and they're planning some of the things that we're talking about. And don't mistake as well the fact that they're planning some of the things, but then all during the school year. So this is one phase, and we always think about it in phases. This is one phase, and we want to get into the schools in this phase. But during the school year, sometimes then the PTA start planning their October events, and they start planning, later in the year, they're going to start planning. It'd be great if they plan their entire year in detail, but the schools are not as organized as you think they are, which is to our advantage for the most part, because you have lots of opportunities, both in terms of the number of people you can talk to and the amount you can keep going back to them to get plugged in, as you said, to all the different events that they have. So the school owners that we talk to very frequently, this is the conversation. Oh yeah, I know you've said to do that, but I've tried it and they won't talk to me for whatever reason, because they'll only work with nonprofits. They'll only do this. They'll only do that. They'll only, they need to get district approval, which is almost always BS. Almost always that's not true. It's just a way to put you off, and so on. And then my question next is, well, okay, how many times did you go talk to them? Well, I talked to them, once a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I walked in and talked to the principal and they said no.
Yeah, it's a one-time thing. And that will almost never work. Yeah. And as you said, your mom proved this to me, this is a little bit longer story, but the district that I work with and I'm sitting in right now, that we had tons of success, in fact, probably the most success we've ever had, was probably the hardest district in the country to get into, because she's worked with many, many districts. And it, again, required different entry points.
Well, and even otherwise smart school owners fall victim to that. Is, again, to rehash, Greg's comment about me, another old story was, Tim and Dave Kovar and I worked very closely for years, and we're still good friends. Tim's not in the business anymore. Dave is obviously running the business and doing a bunch of other stuff as well. But it took me years to get them to do anything with their schools. And they would both come back to me and say, no, you don't understand California, because they're in Sacramento. It's like, well, no, I think I probably do understand California. All the schools have the same different things that they'll use to push you off. And finally, they saw one of the things I was doing, and we did a fundraiser walk for Chuck Norris's Kick Drugs Out of America and a couple other organizations, and I printed 100,000 flyers. And actually, it was back when newsprint was cheap, so I did 16-page booklets. You remember that one? And half of it was promotional for the martial arts school, and half of it was for the event. And I get it, distributed in all the schools, and then I did a couple of other things like that. And finally, I got them, and they did a fundraiser for their local teen center, and they were getting so much traffic from that they couldn't handle the traffic. But over and over and over and over, they said, you can't do that in California. They won't let you do anything. They won't let you go in. They won't let you do that. So it was just, and we now have Jeff Smith joining us as well, with our 14-minute window until we have to go to our $1 million schools. Yeah, for all those who say that there aren't $1 million schools, we're literally leaving and going to our meeting of only the $1 million schools.
Yeah, how many members do we have working on headed towards 2 million goal this year?
Yeah,
we've got quite a few. And you brought up Master Lapin too, sir. I mean, keep in mind what Master Oliver said with her doing all of the traveling that she's been doing lately. Her school is still performing, if not better, while she's out on vacation, because of her strong staff and obviously the help of the group.
Well, that's right. I mean, I mentioned Tim Harrison doing the Route 66.
There you go. Yeah.
Jeff, what did he do? 92,000 while he was.
Well, he was pissed off because he did 126,000 in May, and then June, when he was gone the whole month on a motorcycle, Route 66, true, he dropped to 96.
Yeah.
And Jan, while she was away, they did 146 or 145.
We should tell Jan. I mean, we keep telling Jan you can just stay away, but
Stay
she
away.
doesn't
They do bigger numbers when you're gone.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
everything you guys are talking about, I mean, everybody, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is our first year where all the states are wide open, right? Granted, I'm in the free state of Florida, but I mean, as far as the COVID restriction goes, that's what I'm referring to. I believe everybody now is wide open. So, I mean, some of the schools I talked to, they've been hesitant, taking their foot off the pedal in the past because, they've either had, there was limitations, I guess, or they felt they were restricted in some cases or not. But I believe this would be the first year, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that all this, everything's wide open. So people are really, been pent up and they're desperate to get out and do something.
Well, fairly recently, I've been in L.A. and in San Diego, which were two of them. California was pretty tightly locked down. Not so much San Diego, but yeah, there's crowds out everywhere and big events going on. And we haven't talked about it yet, but we know the movie theaters and the movie promotion thing is, Maverick set new records, and then Thor set records, and I'm missing one. Minions set records, and there's something else that did really. Elvis even for a music by I think it's at 200 million or something like that now. So, but there were some big openings. I mean, back to numbers that are exceeding pre-pandemic. So
yeah, and that's a good canary for what's going on with even though people are complaining about the economy, people are going out and doing activities like that, in so that's more of a canary in the coal mine, if my metaphor isn't working, for what should be happening in a martial arts school.
yeah,
What's really happening is kind of like the 4-minute mile. You know how long it took to break the 4-minute mile. And as soon as they did it, that next week, there 4 or 5 more people broke it. And that's what happened with our $1 million schools. When we finally started getting $1 million schools, which was several years ago, now that became the new norm. And now everybody's not happy if they're doing 100,000. And then since we had so many go on past that 100,000, now the new norm is they want to get 2 million instead of 1. So it was first 1 million, then 1.5, and now 2 million. And we found the biggest obstacles on accomplishing any of those was between their 2 ears.
yeah.
It was just their thinking, and you really have to think outside the box. You can't. Everybody wants to do what they were doing before and then do a few things that we're doing, thinking that's going to make a difference rather than doing the whole system.
Yeah.
And it's no different than any martial arts. You can't have your martial arts and expect to get much better just by adding 1 or 2 things to it. It has to be the whole thing from white belt to black belt that gets somebody to be a black belt and beyond.
Absolutely. And again, we're going to run into our high-level school meeting in 11 minutes, and we've only skimmed the surface on back-to-school marketing so far. But let's start with a general principle. I've got this painting in the background by Neiman, and that's the facade of Wall Street, but you see all the pillars there. Imagine the Parthenon, where you have 20, 30, 40 pillars. Is the thing about back-to-school marketing is you're now in prime season, and I think most people recognize that it's a big season, but then what they do is they behave like they always behave. And to me, the rule is anytime you're having a good results, anytime you're at a peak season, you always want to add fuel to the fire. You want to double down, then you want to triple down, and then you want to quadruple down. And the mission is to get overwhelmed with traffic, frankly. And so, to me, rule number 1 is triple the advertising budget, quadruple the amount of external community outreach, do some new buddy event once or twice a week for 6 weeks, put all of the internal marketing activity that you would normally do, and if you try to take what you did in the last 12 months and do it in 6 weeks. So pizza parties and movie nights and crazy hair day and glow chuck days and all that kind of stuff. So, and by the way, if you're less than 100 students, referrals don't do you a whole lot of good. You're not going to skyrocket your growth with referral systems. But once you're at 2, 3, 400 students, you should be able to generate enough traffic, to stay even. So if you're at 400 students a month, 400 active students, and you're losing 2% a month, or 2.5%, you should be able to get 10 students a month from internal referral systems and so forth. But the first starting point is take from 2 weeks before your schools go back in session. In Colorado, that's like right the hell now, and 4 or 5 weeks after they go back in session, and try to do as much marketing in 6 weeks as you normally would do in a year. And again, we know from back to school nights, from student orientation days, from welcome back days, from welcome back events, and then from PE teachers for the day getting permission slips, from setting up before or after school enrichment programs, all of that kind of stuff. Just that's labor intensive but is not expensive. You could probably generate, not probably, my schools and our client schools have generated as many as 100, 120, 150 enrollments in 6 weeks just from that one thing. From a standpoint of other advertising, it's the time to crank up your Facebook advertising. Make sure you do that well. Most everybody we talk to who is having mediocre results with Facebook are doing a horrible job running it. It's a time to make sure you're getting every click on Google. So it's a good time to make sure you're well positioned, all that stuff on Google, but make sure you're buying every click available and doing that a good job at that. It's a great time to launch every door direct mail, targeted direct mail, newspaper inserts with Retail Me Not or the local daily newspapers. If you don't know how to do that, we can walk you through how to do that. But it's time to take 6 weeks and do as much marketing as you normally do in 12 months. And by the way, I always find if you want to add 100 students to your school, let's say I'm at 150, I want to get to 250, or I'm at 250, I want to get to 350. It's easier to do that quick than it is to do it slow. Wouldn't you agree with that, Master Smith?
Well, I had a call this morning with one of our members who was a little frustrated because he kept he wanted to be that $1 million school, and he's kind of stuck in the 70s, which most schools would be going, thank you, I'll take that $70,000 school. But when I went through his marketing, and he thought he was doing a lot of marketing, and we actually analyzed it, he was basically doing just internet marketing with maybe a sprinkle here and there of a live event. And I said, if you remember on our meeting last week, we were talking about filling your marketing calendar. And every day you have to say to yourself, what am I doing today to get more students into my school? And if I don't have something going on every day, and 3 or 4 things sometimes, if you divide them into 3 categories and then start filling up your calendar, one is internal marketing, one is external marketing, and one is internet marketing. Now I've got to make sure that I have a list. That's why even on our quick start, your videos you did to add 100 students, that's exactly what we did on those 3-hour videos. We covered all 3 phases of that. So we gave everybody 50 or 60 things, because most people get 3 or 4 things and they think they run out of things to do. The other mistake they make, besides not putting it to a calendar, is making the assumption when they hear something is they'll say, well, I did that before, it didn't work. And I use that analogy about teaching a sidekick to a beginner student, and he goes to use it and gets blocked and punched in the face. So he says he's never going to use it again. And I said, well, don't ever use it like that again. But if you do it like this, and then I showed him a video of Bill Wallace doing it. And then he went, oh, okay, I get the picture. I have to set it up differently. I have to apply it differently. That's the same thing with your marketing. It's not just doing these 50 or 60 things that we're telling you. It's to keep enough stats to see where the problem is. Yeah. I had some people that told me their marketing wasn't working. I said, why? He said, because we only got 3 enrollments. And I said, well, how many leads did you get? He said 120.
Oh my God.
I said, well, it's not your marketing, it's the steps. So that's why the stats have to be there so you can analyze what you are doing.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things that we really help with all of our new members that come in the front door. They seem to have a big challenge with that conversion.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe to leave it at that. And Bob, your number 720-256-0208.
8.
Okay. Um, sometimes an 8 looks like a 6 and or whatever, but
I have the same prescription.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But well, I can see better with my right eye without them, and I can't see crap with my left eye.
Well, I can't see out of one, but I'm blind in the other.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, it's fair to say, though, anybody who was on here or listening to us today, I mean, if you go back and you talk to one of your buddies that's also a school owner and it said this is all BS, you're really hanging out with the wrong crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, give us a call and, let's get you in with the top tier. I mean, and surround yourself with the best of the best in the industry. And again, my number is 720-256-0208. Master Smith brought up a calendar. Anybody who gives me a call today, I'll be happy to share a sample of that calendar with them as well.
Yeah, yeah. And as a summary of what you said, Master Smith, and what you've said, Master Moody, is there are you used it as internal marketing, external marketing, internet marketing. Well, we're having great results with paid advertising on Facebook. But usually that's the bigger schools because it's kind of complicated to get it to work. That's all stuff that we can teach you. We're having great results with pay-per-click advertising and with search optimization. Search optimizations, if you haven't done a good job of it now, it's kind of a longer-term project. But getting out and collecting all the back to school, because Greg, you also work with Rev Marketing, and they do a great job on websites. And I know May, June is a busy time for Google search. July is a slow time, and back to school, it skyrockets. Right. And so you want to be in front of all that traffic. And so there's social media marketing, and there's search marketing, and then there's retargeting online. And retargeting means you take all that prospect list and tell Google and tell Facebook to go show ads to them. And you put a little code in there and they show up at your website. Now you retarget them, even if they didn't give you their information. We're retargeting by direct mail now too, which is fascinating. A conversation for a different day. But then with community outreach, that's such a big topic. We could talk for a weekend about it. But what we touched on was elementary schools and middle schools. But it's any organization in your area that has your target clientele. We have a highly successful 7-figure MMA school in Houston, and they were working with all the big oil companies. And they would go in and teach a introductory class to the employees at the big oil companies, work through the human resources department, and they were feeding themselves a consistent flow of 30 to 45-year-old adult professionals, male and female, from working with the big employers in their area. I've done the same thing with big condo complexes and apartment complexes, working through the marketing department and working through and promoting all of their clientele. But any organization in your area, whether it's McDonald's that has a big flow of people where you can have them drop something in the bag and do a tray liner, or whether it's at the other end of the spectrum in elementary school, are all places where you can go round up a bunch of people for free or cheap. And I'm not talking about you pay them. I'm talking about you get them to cooperate as an employer because you do a great job on health and productivity, and as a business like McDonald's, working with their pet charities, Ronald McDonald House or something like that. And then you have all of the internal things you can do. And most broke schools tell us they get all of their new students from referrals. But then what we ask them is a simple question, well, what referral systems are you using? And that usually draws a blank. But what I mean by referral systems are pizza parties, birthday parties, activities where one student brings 20 or 30 of their friends, and events where 40% of your students bring an average of 1.5 friends. So big events where they bring one or two friends each. Buddy days are certainly one of those, but there's a lot of other more creative things, and things where you host a birthday party or something. So those are activities internal. And then we haven't even touched on, when we have a kid that comes in for an intro, we'll enroll half of their parents, sometimes 60, 70% of them. So one enrollment turns into two or three. I've had schools where we had 25 intros and 35 enrollments because we were so efficient at adding the parents and adding the siblings. But that's a story for another day. Hey, we have our heavy hitters on the other meeting room. Bob, do you want to go get them started and tell them we're on our way?
Yes,
And
sir. Okay.
Master Moody, anything to summarize before we go?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that everybody listening to the call needs to make sure that number one, as we started out with this, the some of the stuff that we're talking about and getting these kind of numbers is doable, and it's all doable. It's all within any of your grasp. It doesn't matter where you're from. I mean, we got examples of people doing these kind of numbers in Mankato, Minnesota, in small towns. Even Jan Lappin, who we talked about, is in Middleburg, Florida. You can look those demographics up.
Juliet, Illinois.
In Johnson City, Tennessee, small towns, and of course also bigger towns, and San Diego and Manhattan and other places that we have clients too. But we've got plenty of people in small towns. So whatever kind of thing goes through your head. I know that one of my extra things that I do is some psychology work, and I know that in people's mind, when you hear those kind of numbers, there's a reaction. There's a cognitive reaction about, well, I know, but there's some reason why I can't do that. There's some reason why that doesn't work. There's some reason why it's going through your head now if you're hearing these kind of numbers. And we've got examples that are counter those, and those may not be powerful enough to overcome this. So what you need to do is set up a time with Bob, and we gave you his number a minute ago. Set up a time with Bob so he can talk to you, go through some of this with you, give you some more ideas for your specific situation, and then you'll talk to Jeff or I, Master Oliver, and then we can take you to the next step and let you understand the next piece for you individually, and that'll help you get through this mental jump. So you can take the next step and take the mental jump so that you can do this for yourself. And if we can help you from there, great, if it's a good fit.
Well, and we could, we're happy to give you a bunch of free information, point you in the right direction if it's not us. But if you're at 40 students, we can show you how to get to 100. If you're at 100, we can show you how to get to 200. And truthfully, our sweet spot tends to be schools that are 20 to 40,000, showing them how to turn their gross into their net, right? So how to take a $40,000 a month school that's grossing 40 and netting 7, and turn that into a school that's grossing 60, 70 and netting 40 or more. So that tends to be our sweet spot, but anybody, we can help you. And, our combined experience at this, Master Smith has been running professional martial arts schools since the 70s. I started running a school in the 70s, but I wouldn't call it professional. I started running my mile high schools now. Coming up on 40 years next year, Greg. And you've been running your organization now for what, 25?
Since 93.
What is that? 2003, 2013. So 22?
Yeah.
No,
that's 30 years.
30 years. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's just about almost 30 years.
I hate that I have 3 different calculator apps on my iPhone now, because I used to be able to do even interest rate calculations in my head.
That means we've got, me too, and that means that we've got too much good knowledge of other stuff. I think when the useless stuff that you can do with your calculator is done with the calculator, that means you're using it for better things.
I saw a meme recently, and it was, I wonder what the space in my brain is doing with the part of it that I used to remember 200 different phone numbers.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's a good meme. Yeah, because I can't remember any phone numbers. No. All right, with that.
Well, yeah, I made an effort for years not to know my own phone number, so I couldn't give it to anybody. But that's a different story. Okay, I'm going to see you soon, and for everybody else, hopefully this has been valuable, and we'd be happy to load you up with more free stuff. And if it's a good fit to work together, we'd be happy to talk about that too.
All right, bye everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Hi.
And I'm going to turn all this off.